Hey, what's good, everybody? I'd like to welcome you guys back to the Boombox Guru channel. I'm your host, LB, and today we're going to be doing a discography review on another one of my favorite metal bands known as Voivod. For this particular discography review, we're going to be focusing on their first five albums, so basically all the studio albums that they did in the 1980s. If you're not familiar with Voivod, they're a Canadian heavy metal band. They formed back in 1982. The members, and I'm just gonna call them members by their nicknames, cause like their regular names are kind of hard to pronounce, and I don't want to mispronounce them. But you have Away, who is the drummer, Snake, who is the lead vocalist, Blackie, who was the original bassist, and Piggy, who was the original guitarist. Of course, Piggy, he passed away, unfortunately, back in 2005 after battling colon cancer. And Blackie, he left the band in the early 90s, came back like somewhere around 2010s, like 2013, and then I think he either left the band again or he was kicked out. I'm not sure about that. But Voivod, they're considered one of the big four of Canadian thrash metal, along with bands Sacrifice, Razor, and Annihilator. And Voivod, what they did was they took progressive metal and they combined it with thrash metal, and they created their own unique style. And as years went on, they managed to, they became more progressive as years went on, and they also managed to kind of add other kind of elements to their sound that I would consider make them more of an avant-garde kind of metal band, honestly. But without further ado, we're gonna get into this discography review, and we're gonna start with the first album, of course. This is War and Payne, released in 1984 on Metal Blade Records. This was Voivod's only album to come out on Metal Blade Records. This is a reissue that was released in, let me see, this came out in 2004. This reissue came out in 2004. Of course, I didn't buy it in 2004. Comes with two discs, the original album. Yeah, it comes with the original album, and then it comes with another bonus disc that has like a bunch of like live music from like shows and so forth. And I think maybe like a DVD with video clips and screensavers and so forth. But War and Payne, this record, this is Voivod's rawest record. It's the rawest, very underground metal. The production on here is not the greatest, but it works in that favor as it's akin to that underground metal, especially with what Metal Blade Records was doing at the time, because Metal Blade Records really focused on a lot of underground metal bands. It has a heavy punk influence, everything from the sound to Snake's vocal approach. He has this very snarly vocal style that he possesses on this record. The band they're not quite as technical or complex as they will later go on to be. This is, on this record, you hear a lot of the Venom and Motorhead influences. So in the context of Voivod, I would say that War and Payne is a pretty standard thrash speed metal record. Although one of the highlights on the album would have to be the song called Voivod, which is also the band's namesake. I feel that song right there was slightly foreshadowing the uniqueness of what Voivod was and where they would later take their sound with the following releases. But War and Payne is a solid debut record. I don't know if I would recommend starting with War and Payne. I think maybe I will recommend the other albums that I'm going to talk about later in the video as a gateway to get into the band first, and then maybe come back to War and Payne. But it's a cool glimpse into early Voivod, when they were a fresh new band who were young, hungry. All they wanted to do was just make breakneck speed thrash metal. So it's a cool glimpse into their early Voivod sound. Also, with this record kind of combining thrash metal with hardcore punk, Voivod became one of the first bands that actually brought those two cultures together as far as metal and punk, because they appealed to both cultures. And anybody that knows their history, at this time in 1984, punks and metalheads did not get along. But Voivod was one of the bands that they took those styles and combined it together with their music. They were able to bring those worlds together. So they would have a lot of punk rockers and a lot of metalheads at their shows. But you know, it's a solid album, a solid debut. I wouldn't consider it the best Voivod record, but it's, like I said earlier, it's a cool glimpse into that early style of Voivod, and it shows. It's a good way to kind of get a sense of where they started from and how they kind of just transitioned to what they would end up being that made them such a successful and influential band. But yeah, War and Payne, 1984, released on Metal Blade Records. So moving along, we have the second Voivod album right here called Roar, released in 1986. You can't just call this album Roar. You got to go Roar, like the title says. I don't know if you can see it, but that's the title right there. You have to be like Roar. And this is the deluxe expanded edition. So it comes with a remastered version of the original album, some live songs, and a DVD, video clips, and so forth. I mainly just listen to the album. So Roar, as it's titled, this record, it has a similar formula to War and Payne, but you can tell that the songwriting has gotten better. It's an improvement. Roar is basically an improvement over War and Payne. The songwriting is better. The band sounds a lot more tighter, and you're starting to get a slight hints of the progression coming forward into their sound. You still get a lot of the Venom and Motorhead influences, and Snake still has more of that snarly punk approach to his vocals, and the band is still breakneck speed from start to finish. I mean, from the first song, Corgo the Exterminator, that song pretty much just sets the tone of the record. It's just breakneck thrash metal and speed metal, but it just sounds so much better and such a bigger improvement over War and Payne. Now, when I was reading about this record, I was reading other reviews. Apparently, Roar is considered like a underrated and undervalued album in Voivod's discography. Apparently, when the record was initially released, it suffered from very poor production, so a lot of people really didn't like it. But like I said, this is a deluxe expanded edition, and the original album has been remastered. So I can't really speak on that part because the remastered version sounds really good. But you know, I consider Roar to be like a bridge between like that War and Payne style and to what they would do on Killing Technology, the next release after this. But it's still an enjoyable listen. I mean, it's just full throttle, like a bunch of fast tempos, lots of aggression, lots of chaos and noise. And I feel like this record, it could have been a soundtrack to a Mad Max film or some 80s dystopian futuristic film that was real popular back in those days. It would have fit perfectly as a soundtrack to one of those movies. And Roar, that's just the perfect title for this record, because if you could sum this album up in one word, it would be Roar. I mean, everything from the apocalyptic lyricism, subject matter, to the apocalyptic imagery that you get right here, you know, the sound, it all fits perfectly. But a very enjoyable listen, a big improvement, well, a slight improvement over War and Payne, and you can tell that the band is getting tighter, and you can tell that they're becoming better musicians, and it's a slight foreshadowing to what they would do successfully on their next album. So speaking of their next album, we have the third release, Killing Technology, released in 1987. This is my favorite Voivod album, mainly because it's the first Voivod album that I bought. It was recommended to me. One of my good friends, Mentally Induced. When I first met him, that's how me and him became friends. He came into the store that I work in, and he had on a Voivod shirt, and I was just starting to really get into the band. And I remember I walked up to him and had a conversation about Voivod, and he recommended Killing Technology. He said, "Yeah, if you really want to get into Voivod, I highly recommend Killing Technology. That's one of their greatest records." So I went on eBay, found a copy, got it in the mail. As soon as I put it in, I was blown away. Killing Technology, this is Voivod's first prog record. This is where they took thrash metal and they combined it with prog rock, and they did a tremendous job with it. This record, the way that they took thrash metal and they just combined it with progressive rock, and this is where you're getting a lot of the odd time signatures. This is where you're getting the complex song structures. I feel like Piggy's unique guitar tone and style, his like off kilter like riffs and stuff, this is where that really came into the fold. Snake still has that snarly kind of punk vocal approach. Away, he's using a lot more double bass and faster tempos. Blackie's bass is just remarkable. Blackie's one of the best basses ever. But not only that, but you get these complex song structures. The band has become way better musicians. The technicality is just out of this world. This was also the first album where they started to bring in a lot of the science, sci-fi, futuristic themes. There's this like robotic voice that appears sporadically throughout the album on certain songs that really helped to enhance that sci-fi experience. And there's also sort of like a mechanical aspect to the record. A lot of the rhythms on here, when they switch up the time signatures, when they switch up the tempos, a lot of the rhythms on here come off as very mechanical, which in my opinion has slight leanings to like industrial metal. And when I say industrial metal, I don't mean like Fear Factory or not Ministry or anything like that. It's just that it just gives it that very robotic, apocalyptic like style to it. It just really helps to enhance that experience, man. But the songs, a lot of the songs on here are at a longer length as well. But the record is just very interesting from start to finish. Some of my favorites on here would be Tornado, Forgotten in Space, Ravenous Medicine, Order of the Black Guards, Cockroaches. This is not an exercise. Honestly, the whole entire album, I can't really pick a solid favorite, man. It's just the whole entire album from start to finish. This is a record that you can just put on and just let play. You won't be bored because, like I said, the complex song structures, the odd and unique time signature, it keeps everything interesting to where you're not bored. But I consider Killing Technology a quintessential Voivod album. If you want to get into Voivod, if you never listened to any of their music and you looking for that album to start with as a gateway into their discography, I would recommend Killing Technology. It was recommended to me, and Voivod has become one of my favorite metal bands. I mean, I have most of their albums on CD, so I would highly recommend Killing Technology as a starting point if you really want to dig into the band's discography, man, because it's a remarkable record. It's one of the most unique metal albums ever released, and it's a metal masterpiece. So yeah, Killing Technology, 1987. All right, so now we're getting to the fourth album, Dimension Atros, released in 1988, and this is a deluxe expanded edition. Comes with 3 discs. Like I said, I usually just focus on the album. I don't really listen to the other discs. I like to focus on the album. But let me tell you something. Just when you thought that the band couldn't top Killing Technology, they did it with this album. Dimension Atros. Oh my goodness, man. What a remarkable record. What an awesome record. They pretty much improved upon an improvement. I mean, Killing Technology was a significant improvement over the first 2 records, and then they managed to top it with this album. Sometimes I have a hard time on whether this is my favorite or Killing Technology. It's hard. It's hard sometimes because both of those records are great. Both of them are metal masterpieces, back-to-back metal masterpieces, man. But with Dimension and Atros, man, the band, they got a lot more progressive, a lot more technical. The complex song structures are, I mean, they really just gelled with the complex song structures. I mean, you got a lot more like odd time signatures and all kinds of crazy tempos, but it just sounds so good. I mean, at this point, I would say that this is Voivod's most complete record because they still managed to take the combinations of that noisy, chaotic era of the first two records with the progressive technicality of Killing Technology, and they just really just enhanced upon that. So many great songs on here. I remember when I first bought this and I heard the song Experiment, when that riff came in, I was like, oh man, this is great. And Tribal Convictions, Chaos Mongers, technocratic manipulators, so many great tracks on here. And the CD version, I think even on the original CD versions, they had a bonus track, which is the band covering the Batman theme song. The old like black and white show, like the 50s, 60s show that used to come on. They covered that Batman theme song, which it's just a funny little joke. Voivod showing their sense of humor, nothing to be taken serious, but they actually did a really good job covering that theme song. But this is just a great record. I believe this is a concept album. Let me see if I can pull it up right quick. But yeah, I believe this is actually a concept album, and there was actually a sequel to this album that came out in the 90s called Phobos. But yes, it says it is a concept album which narrates the exploits of Voivod's mascot cyborg Korgel. Yeah, I don't know the deep story. I got to go back and listen to the lyrics. But yeah, just a remarkable record. And like I said, sometimes listening to Killing Technology and this album back to back, I have such a hard time trying to determine which one's my favorite because they're both such great works of music. But Dimension is definitely I would say a bit more tighter and more technical than Killing Technology. At this point, you can hear like the continual growth in the band's sound and style, and as well as in Snake's vocals, because he still kind of has that kind of snarly punk aesthetic to it. But on this record, I feel this is where he started to add a bit more melody. He was adding a little bit more melody to his singing, and you could tell a slight difference that he was even growing as a vocalist. But just a great record. Like, whether you want to start with Killing Technology or Dimension Atros, you can't go wrong with either one, because both of these records are metal masterpieces. I mean, just great works of metal music. Highly recommended. One of my favorites. This is my second favorite Voivod album. I gotta keep Killing Technology as my first favorite because that's the one that really got me into the band. But Dimension is it's a close contender, man. Sometimes I want to swap, but just a great record. All right, so now we're down to the final album in this video, and most of you already know what this is if you're a Voivod fan. That is Nothing Face, released in 1989. And this was the band's first album on a major label. It came out on MCA, I believe. They're Mechanic / MCA. Mechanic was like a small, I think, subsidiary label that MCA had back in the day. And I think a lot of underground metal bands were kind of signed to it back then. I know one of my favorite thrash metal bands, Violence, they were signed to it. So I'm gonna be honest with you. Nothing Face is actually, it hasn't always been one of my favorite Voivod albums. It's only been recently that the record is actually starting to grow more on me, and I guess a lot of the reasons why it hasn't always been one of my go-to Voivod albums is because I favor like Killing Technology and Dimension Atros because of the more abrasiveness and aggression that they have, along with the more progressive technical aspects as well. So Voivod with Nothing Face, this marked a departure from that sound. This is essentially their progressive metal record. The more noisy, chaotic aspects of the previous two records, or even the previous four records, is really not there. I mean, this is really them at their most tightest and most technical and complex at this point. But Nothing Face is the band's most popular record. I mean, I'm trying to see where, Nothing Face is Voivod's it's their most successful album to date. It's their only album that entered the Billboard 200, where it peaked at number 114. They did an awesome cover of Pink Floyd's Astronomy Domine, which that song, if you never heard the Pink Floyd version, you wouldn't even know that song was a cover because of the way it fits so well in the context of this record. But it's considered one of Loudwire actually named it at number 23 in their list of top 25 progressive metal albums of all time. But I think that's why that record it's really been growing on me, because I recognize that it's a departure, and it also marks a beginning of a new era, because Snake has changed as the vocalist. He's evolved. He's not using the snarly, more punk style that he had on the previous records. He's actually singing on this record, and his singing voice is great. So he's showing maturity as a vocalist. Blackie, Piggy, and Away are showing maturity as musicians. I mean, this is a very progressive and technical record. I mean, the song structures on here are at its utmost complex, but there's also some mellow moments that they bring on a lot of the songs. There's some songs that start off kind of somber and mellow, and then they kind of bring in a little bit of heaviness and a little bit of the little bit of the thrashy kind of elements of past records. A lot of the thrash elements are kind of toned down on this record. So I could tell that they wanted to bring more emphasis on the progressive metal and progressive rock style of their sound. And I would even call this avant-garde. I think this was the record where they really showcased their avant-garde and more eclectic elements of their sound and what they could do. But like I said, it hasn't always been one of my favorite Voivod records, but it's growing on me. The more I listen to it, the more I'm starting to get that, this was marking a new era for the band, which I would say I guess they kind of further expanded upon on the next album, Angel Rat, which came out in 91. But this record deserves all its accolades. Even though it's not yet one of my favorites and go-tos, it deserves all of its accolades because it's still a timeless record. I can only imagine how mind-blowing this record was when it was released in 1989. It was still kind of mind-blowing to me when I first listened to it years later. So it deserves all of its accolades. I understand why this record is so revered. It's a great record, and I'm gonna continue to listen to this record, and hopefully it will grow more on me, and it will click with me one day, and I'll be like, yeah, I understand. But I don't hate Nothing Face at all. I like it. If anything, this will probably be one of the top gateway albums to get into Voivod. Because when I was early when I first discovered them and was getting into their music, this was the record that really popped up the most, was Nothing Face. It was the one that I was seeing so many people talk about, or I would read about in articles and reviews. It was Nothing Face. But still, even though it may not be one of my go-tos when it comes to me listening to Voivod, I still enjoy the record. I still think that it's a great record, and it deserves all its accolades and everything that it's accomplished. It really showed how great of a metal band Voivod was, and essentially, you could say that this is what the band was working up to. Nothing Face is what the band was working up to at that point, because you can hear if you listen to these albums from War and Payne all the way to Nothing Face, you can hear the progression. So this is what they were working to. They accomplished it, and they were successful with it. So yeah, Voivod, Nothing Face, released in 1989. And also I want to mention this is a OG CD pressing. This isn't a reissue. This one and Killing Technology are only ones that aren't reissues. But yeah, this is a original CD pressing. I think I got this off of eBay, I believe. Yeah, and I didn't really pay too much money for it. It was for a reasonable price. But great record, another metal masterpiece. Alright, so that's it for this video. my discography review of Voivod's first 5 albums, 1984 to 1989. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun doing this video because Voivod is one of my favorite bands. I think they're one of the greatest metal bands of all time. Very influential. Even though they never really hit it big commercially, they were very influential. I mean, Dave Grohl of the Foo Fighters, this is one of his favorite bands. I think that's actually how I even caught wind of Voivod, was through Dave Grohl. Watching interviews and him talk about them extensively. You can tell that he was really a fan of them. He's even worked with a few of the members of the band, and they're just a great metal band, one of the most unique metal bands of all time. And even now, they're dropping new music, and they're still kicking butt in the metal community. They're not one of those bands that have pretty much declined in quality of records and so forth. They're still putting out quality music. Their latest album, Synchro Anarchy, is honestly one of the best metal albums of this year. But with that being said, hope you guys will enjoy this video. Hope you guys will check out some of these records if you've never listened to Voivod as my personal recommendations. Hope you guys enjoy the journey and getting into this very unique and influential metal band. If you did enjoy this video, do me a huge favor. Hit that thumbs up and give me a like. Helps with the algorithm. Also, be sure to tap the subscribe button and hit that bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I drop new content. I want to give a thanks to all of you out there who have subscribed to the channel. All of you who are watching the videos, who've shared the videos. However you have shown support to my channel, I truly appreciate it. And as always, hope everybody has a blessed day, a blessed week, and love, peace, and music. Peace out, y'all.